It's been almost 2 years since I coil converted my GQ Patrol, and today we're finally getting it engineered. But as always, it's not going to be easy and will challenge me both mentally,
hard suck,
and physically.
And so now, I'm in the hospital.
And as I'll quickly find out, it's not going to be cheap either.
Engineering the car costed me about
But we've got heaps to do, so let's not waste any time and get cracking.
Now, why are we getting the Patrol engineered? Well, a few of you might remember that almost 2 years ago, I performed a coil swap on my leaf sprung GQ, which involved swapping the cab and the engine over to a brand new chassis. Now, as you'd expect, the new chassis actually came with a new chassis number, which now no longer matched my cab and engine. And this can create all sorts of issues with transferring the car, insurance, and the police. Now, you might have thought, like me, that it's just as easy as going down to Vic Roads and getting the numbers swapped over, but it's not. And you actually need to get a VAS certificate, which is also known as engineering, that certifies that you've done the swap correctly. So the first step is actually getting an initial inspection done, and that'll give me an idea of what I need to change to get the car to comply. But I do know there's already a few jobs that need to be taken care of, so we'll start with those.
So the first job is to fix up this very obviously digged up exhaust. So let's pull it out and start making a new one.
So to build the exhaust, I went down to a local exhaust shop, bought a bunch of pipe, as well as some exhaust flanges and gaskets, and also a couple exhaust hangers. Between all this stuff, I think we should be pretty right to build ourselves a full exhaust.
Now, when it comes to making an exhaust, you pretty much just have to figure it out as you go. So start with one end and work your way along and keep your fingers crossed that it's all going to turn out.
First bit of exhaust in. Other thing obviously you got to consider is that you can actually get it all in the car and mount it up. We'll need a hanger there, but
it can be a little tricky to navigate some of the components under the car, so when you're doing it, just make sure you measure twice and cut once. Being that this exhaust is made using mild steel, it means it's super easy to put together, and you can do things like easily tack it while it's on the car. It's also a pretty cheap material, which is good because it's not a huge loss if you stuff up a cart.
all right, so that's the exhaust in terms of, figuring out where it goes. That's it done. Yeah, it's all tacked together. Obviously now I've got to pull it out, complete weld everything, and then obviously give it a coat of paint to make it all look nice. That's the hard part done though. So once I rip this out, we can get the welder out, run a few beads, should be happy days.
I went over all the joints with the wire wheel just to make sure it was all super clean and to make the welding as easy and as strong as possible. With the welds all looking good, it was a final cleanup with the wire wheel before hanging it up, ready for some paint.
All right, so just go for the exhaust, a coat of paint. Looks good when it's wet, see what it's like when it dries. Might be a couple runs, but it's gonna get filthy under the car anyway, it's an exhaust.
Now, as it always goes, who's patient enough to actually let their paint fully dry? So I might have a few fingerprints on my exhaust, but that doesn't worry me. I was just eager to get it back in the car.
All right, so the exhaust is now all in, all bolted up. Now, while the car's still in the hoist, there's a couple other little things I have to do for the engineering. Obviously, because I'm taking the car in to get engineered, it's got to be in a roadworthy state. So I'm going to be taking off the 35s for one, and swapping them with a normal set of tyres, and also taking out the springs and swapping them with a set of 2-inch springs. I'm not getting the 3-inch lift engineered because there's a lot involved in that, a lot of cost too.
Now, you might be wondering why I'm not getting the springs and tyres engineered, and well, for one, 35s aren't engineerable in Victoria as far as I'm aware, so there's no chance in doing that. And as for the springs, there is a huge associated cost and a lot of work that goes into getting suspension swerve tested, and so for me, I made the call not to get it done. Now, I'm stealing a set of 33s off the faithful family Patrol, and these will slot on just nicely and make it nice and roadworthy. And with that all done, we were ready to roll it out of the shed.
Hell of a lot quieter in the cab. I'll tell you what, it's a lot smaller on 2-inch and 33s. It actually makes you realise how little Patrols actually are. They're not big cars, unlike a Land Cruiser. All nice and legal now, so big thumbs up.
Now, my last job is to take off my lift-off canopy as well as the under tray toolboxes, and this is just going to ensure that the engineer can have a good look around the tray as well as where I've done welding to the chassis.
Alright, so the patrol is now ready to take to the engineers. We've got the canopy off, we've got the toolboxes off as well. So that just means they can get right in there, have a good look at everything. So I reckon we get on the road and get it over there, see how the first inspection goes.
And it's the little things that count, so a quick car wash on the way down was definitely to be done.
Alright, so driving back from the first inspection. Now, he's got to write up a list and email it to me, so I'll hopefully get that in the next couple days. He said overall pretty good. He said there's a couple little minor things. He just quickly mentioned a couple little minor things. He said just cable routing along the brake lines and like the brake line clamps and things. A few of them were perished and some bushes and stuff. So that's all pretty straightforward. The only big one he did mention to me now was to do with how I've mounted the headboard of the tray down to the chassis. It looks like I'm gonna have to do some modifying to that to make it all compliant. But anyway, we'll wait for the full list, hope to get that the next couple of days, and then we can start ticking off some of the things, and yeah, soon enough it'll be all right to go. All right, so the patrol's back in the shed. Now, it's been a while since we had our first initial inspection for the engineering. It does take quite a while to book everything. You gotta book in advance by a couple months and, you know, work around everything else. So anyway, we're back in the shed now. The inspection, the second inspection, or hopefully final inspection, is coming up soon. So we're gonna get stuck in now. From last time, I do now have a list of things that I've got to fix. It's not a massive list. A lot of it is just like little things because it is effectively like a roadworthy, as well as getting engineering done for things like the turbo and the whatever else. A lot of it is just like roadworthy requirement stuff. So we're gonna tackle the big jobs first, and then hopefully once they're out of the way, we can start doing little stuff. So anyway, we're not gonna waste any time. We'll get stuck into it and I'll tell you what we're tackling first. So our first job actually has to do with the chassis. Now, when we built the patrol, and more specifically the tray, you might remember that I wanted to tie the headboard into the chassis for like a stronger tray, kind of like a roll bar. But unfortunately, the way we have gone about mounting to the chassis isn't actually compliant. There's a couple little things that I needed to do differently. So what I'm gonna do is rip this tray off quickly and disconnect a few things, and then I can give you a better look at how I had it connected and what we're gonna have to change it to.
With the way I've set up the tray, it's super easy to pull on and off, which makes jobs like this nice and easy.
All right, so with the tray off, we can actually get a bit of a closer look at what the problem is and what we're dealing with. So pretty much the thick of it is that we've welded something onto the chassis that hasn't been welded on correctly. And pretty much it comes down to the shape of this bracket and the fact that it has vertical welds on the side. Now, you will see vertical welds on this car from factory, like on some of the body mounts and stuff, which is why originally I was under the impression that that's okay to do. But the reason they can do that from standard is because they cool the car at all the same rate. It's this whole process to make sure that you don't get like a stress point or fracture point. And effectively by doing this creates a weak point in the chassis. So pretty much I've got to cut this off, reshape it so that there are no vertical welds. So a great example of that is on the chassis bracing that I also put on. This stuff is all fine, and that's because it's actually got angled ends, so they're not vertical, straight up and down, and that's what is compliant. So pretty much that's what we've got to try and replicate. So the fun mission is going to be getting a grinder in around here and taking this off. But I don't know, just gonna have to give it a crack. Just to give myself a bit more room, I'm just gonna take off the sliders as well, just so I can get the grinder in there a bit easier. All right, so I've put some more appropriate clothing on and we're ready to have a crack at cutting this off. Now, weapon of choice is the corded grinder, just so I'm hoping I can sort of get this in sort of parallel to the chassis. And the plan is to sort of start on this side over here and go around the top and bottom. And then I might be able to sort of get a chisel in behind and help fold it away, break it off without having to cut around the whole thing entirely. So we'll see how we go, but let's get grinding.
Now, I'm sure there's a few of you screaming at me right now as I don't have a guard on the grinder, and I agree, but in this instance, I took it off so that I can cut parallel along the chassis. Sometimes if you have a guard on, it can mean that you can't hold it flat against a surface, and I'm worried about doing this as I don't want to accidentally cut into the chassis itself. My plan is to grind away the welds that I can and then use a hammer and cold chisel to free it from the chassis.
Ta-da! Got it. First inspection, what's great is I haven't cut into the chassis whatsoever, which is really good. All right, that's one side done. So we'll rip this slider off as well. All right, let's have a crack at the other side. See if it comes off as easy or not.
I thought I had a good excuse for not using a guard on the grinder, but as it turns out, there's no such thing, and I was about to find out what happens when you're not careful.
All right, so a bit of a turn of events. As I was grinding on the car, the disc got caught, and because of the angle, the grinder shot down, and it's actually caught the back of my leg on my calf and got caught on my pants. And so now I'm in the hospital, and hopefully we can get her patched up because I'm running out of time to get this car engineered. So I need to be back there so I can keep working on it. But yeah, should be able to get it patched up, and hopefully we'll be back into it soon.
All right, so as you saw there, as I was working on the car, ended up having a bit of an incident with the grinder. Pretty much when I was sort of sitting on my backside, grinding away, and I must have flexed the disc slightly. It grabbed, the disc exploded, the grinder kicked down, and it got to the back of my calf, got wrapped up in my pants. And yeah, so I did a pretty good job at slicing open. A bit of a disclaimer, I'll flash up an image of the cut that they had to stitch up. Luckily, I didn't hit anything vital, so no like tendons, didn't hit any arteries or anything, so that was good. So did have to go for plastic surgery, and they'll manage to stitch it up. So it was like a few internal stitches for the muscle and like a dozen external for the skin. And it's been 2 weeks now, the patrol's been sitting here, but my leg is better. I've just got a compression bandage on, probably can't see that. Yeah, Darren's gonna help me get this thing back together because I did actually have to push back the engineering inspection date because I was unable to work on the car. So it's been pushed forward by about a month and a half, or pushed back by about a month and a half. So, and coming into Christmas time, yeah, there's just a lot of stuff happening. So the next step is just to continue on and keep knocking things off the list so that it's all ready. But yeah, a little bit of a hiccup. Always be safe when you're using power tools. They can be dangerous even with all the PPE on. So yeah, be careful, but let's get stuck back into the patrol.
Lucky for me, Darren kindly offered to help remove the other mount on the chassis, which was good because I had a little bit of PTSD when it came to holding onto a grinder after the incident. Now, we actually took use of the King Chrome slide hammer to even out any warpage in the chassis that was caused by using the cold chisel, and this worked really well, just tacking on a nut and then using the slide hammer. Then it was time for some primitive CAD work to make up some new fish plates that would be welded to the chassis. The new plates are designed as to not have any sides that need to be welded vertically, only angled welds or horizontal. Next, it was time for a test fit, so we lowered the tray down, tested the brackets in place, primed them, and then they could be tacked in place.
So the fish plates have been painted and they come up really good. I reckon the engineer should be happy with them, which is wicked. So soon enough we'll be able to drop the tray back on, and hopefully it should all fit up correctly, and then we can move on to all the next stuff. So another little thing I'm going to be doing while the tray is off the car, and this isn't for the engineering but just something that I wanted to be doing, and now's the time, is actually putting in a water tank. So I got it's a 50 litre slimline poly tank. I bought it from a place called Goff Plastics in Queensland. Wasn't that cheap, but it was the one that fit. And so while we're here, we're gonna make up some brackets that can fix up to the floor of the tray. And then I'll have my water out of the canopy, which is awesome, and also down low. It is behind the rear wheels, but sort of the best spot I can think to put it in. So we're putting that in too.
So again, Darren helped me to make up some quick brackets just so we could mount this tank neatly up under the floor of the tray. And with all that done, the tray was ready to be lowered back onto the car for the last time. I'm super happy with how these revised mounts came out. I think the engineer will be very pleased.
All right, so got the tray all back on, the water tank's under there, all the plates are now fixed, which is awesome. That's the big job out of the way. And I've actually just raised it up on the hoist just to start connecting underneath. All right, so the next job I'm doing is I'm going along and I've got to redo I mean, not just here, but a lot of the cabling, where I've used cable ties, isn't appropriate. You're not meant to cable tie your cables to the brake lines. So instead I've gone and bought a bunch of these automotive P-clips. They're stainless with a rubber band around them. And I'm gonna use these to then fix all the cables to the chassis via holes that are already drilled in there. So we'll go along, do a few of them. So it's been a little bit since I was last doing some of the engineering checklist on the patrol. It's sort of been a bit of an extended process because it's booked so far in advance, but also I'm sort of using the car whilst in between working on it. So yeah, just sort of ticking off bits at a time, but it's good to finally have a few of the major ones ticked off, like the chassis plating and all that sort of stuff. I was just this morning just measuring up some hoses and things that I've got to replace because there's a few different ones on here, so that. But now I'm gonna get stuck into a couple of other little jobs. I think the first one I want to do is I've actually got to fix the steering wheel grip because it's loose. So I've bought a few little goodies that'll hopefully fix that. I've got a little bit of a method in mind. So let's pull this steering wheel off. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but that's what we're dealing with. Steering wheel off. So, see that? The skin is like twisting on the wheel, and that's non-compliant, or whatever you want to call it. So that's got to be fixed. And hopefully my method works. So to fix this, I've bought two things. I've got a good glue, and I've also got a syringe with a needle tip. So the method that I saw online is to get a glue that isn't too thick, and then use a needle and syringe to inject it into the back of the steering wheel. Now, I've actually just discovered when I pulled it off, there is already a hole. So I'm probably gonna be able to squeeze a bit in there, but I can still use the needle tip to, inject it around the wheel as it needs it. And hopefully that fixes it. All right, let's see how we go. Oh, it's quite thick. Start with that amount. I feel like a surgeon. And let's just whack this in here. Oh, it worked. I reckon I'm definitely gonna have to do the injection with the syringe. All right, look at that. This is hard. And it says it takes 2 hours to cure. So while the glue in the steering wheel is drying, I'm gonna do some electrical stuff. So one thing on the list was this battery terminal. It's just kind of a bit old, and I don't know, I've got heaps of cables running off it. So I've bought something else and we'll try and neaten it up a bit. The main reason behind it was probably my very dodgy terminal cover, which is just a bit of rubber cable tied to the terminal. So yeah, we'll fix that. I've been meaning to do this, clean up these battery terminals for so long, so I suppose this is a good excuse to finally do it properly. If you're not going for a roadworthy, it is a great idea to have a sheet of rubber, if you've got a bad terminal, to get a sheet of rubber over it, just so it can't earth out on anything. Same if you've got batteries in the rear of your car, like second batteries or whatever, just a little bit of rubber over the terminal, just to make sure nothing can earth out on the battery. And so here's what I've bought to replace it. It is just a Unilug, universal one, but it's got good posts on it. It's also got an adapter if you've got one of the smaller ones. It's screwed down like the terminal cover, which is the main thing that I needed, a good terminal cover. And I also bought a little 4-way fuse holder, because I had a few things just running off inline fuses and it kind of looked a bit daggy. So instead I'm gonna have this little blade fuse holder that mounts to the terminal and just sits here on top of the battery neatly, and then I can wire stuff off that. Should be a bit neater. So there we go. Good thing I got the right size post.
Now, this was actually a great job for me to do, as having a neat battery terminal makes your life much easier if you have to take the terminal off or pull the battery out. So I highly recommend you do this yourself if your battery terminals do need a tidy up.
So we've got our battery all cleaned up now, conduited a bunch of wires, reorganized a bunch of wires and where they're routed, and most importantly got those new terminal covers on and the new terminal. So it's looking a heap better. Should have done it a long time ago, and now it's a good one to tick off the list. All right, so the next job on the list is actually to do with the winch. Now, I've got to put terminal covers on the end of the cable. When I installed it, I didn't have any, I didn't put any on, I didn't really think much of it, but it is a good idea to put some on just to protect the terminals and stop them from rusting, so we'll do that. Now, the other thing that I'm gonna address while I'm doing the terminal covers is that I'm actually meant to make sure that anything that isn't fused, any sort of cabling that isn't fused, has to be double insulated. Now, This cable is twin sheath welding cable, so it's got 2 layers of insulation around it. So to me, that qualifies as double insulated, but just to be sure, I've got some of this braided cable wrap, which I'm gonna try and feed over the winch cables. It'll probably make it look a bit better too, because it is bright orange, and it'll just protect it from, you know, rubbing on like the plastic grill, because it doesn't really contact any metal. So it could be a little bit fiddly, but yeah, we'll start doing that.
This is another one of those jobs that I should have already done, so it's a good excuse to do it all properly. But yeah, realistically, should have just done it right in the first place.
Well, there's one cable out. Hasn't worn through anywhere, which is good.
I expected these cables to put up a bit of a fight, but they actually all came out pretty easy, which is good to know for future reference if they ever need to come out again.
All right, now before I try and feed it onto the one that's already in the car, let's do one onto one of these first. All right, it kind of looks pretty straightforward. Once you it sort of works like across multiple sizes, depending on how tight you want it to fit. So like if you bunch it up, it gets thicker, and if you pull it tight, it's kind of like a Chinese finger trap. Like it tightens on my finger, like that. And I think you got to burn the ends so they don't fray, or I might just tape them. And hopefully I've got enough. That's the other thing. But that's on there, like that. That's actually pretty mad. Now I'm just going through and just wrap it with duct tape, electrical tape, sorry. And there you go. Looks pretty neat, also anyway.
Now, if you're a bit more prepared than I am, I'd highly recommend using heat shrink instead of electrical tape. I think it'll look a lot better and last a lot longer. But nonetheless, with our cables now nicely braid wrapped, we could start installing them back into the car.
Very good. That worked well. And now it's nice and insulated. Before, I just had to move inside the shed. The sun out there is an absolute killer.
As I was pulling the cables through, I could definitely feel that the braided wrap gave it that extra abrasion resistance.
All right, so the last bit is to put these terminal covers on. I think they're like a universal fit size, so I have to cut the end down a touch, which I can do pretty easy. Look at that. You beauty. And I just remembered I'm going to give the terminals a bit of a clean up just with a wire brush. Already better. Should go on there. And there, that looks perfect. Much better overall, much better. All right, so that's the winch cables all sorted out, so I'm very glad to tick that off the list. Winch terminal covers up the top. I've just come over to check on my steering wheel, and I don't want to move it too much, but it's definitely getting hard. So I'm gonna leave it for the full 24 hours before I put it back on, but it looks like it's working. Now, our next job actually has to do with the oil feed for the turbo. Now, the engineers said that where the feed fitting comes out of the block, it's too close to the engine mount itself, and it's, you know, it doesn't touch, but it is very close, which is fair enough. So pretty much I need to get a different style of fitting, whether that be like a 45-degree fitting, or like if I can somehow get an elbow in there, but it is tight, like, you know, amount of space to be able to wind something in. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna actually pull the feed line off the turbo. Yeah, we'll rip that off quickly, and then we'll see how we go. All right, there you go. So that's our oil feed line. We'll take that with us down to Pertec, and we should be able to get something made up to suit. All right, so I've managed to pick up all the different parts that I need. Just consisted of like some miscellaneous bits, as well as a lot of like hoses and fittings and stuff. First one I'm gonna do is the oil feed for the turbo. So I've gone and got a new length of braided hose, which is a bit longer so it doesn't foul on the actuator. It's also got different ends on it. Now the two ends I've got are a 45-degree or a 90-degree fitting, and either one of those is gonna give me the best clearance away from the engine mount. So I wasn't sure which one would be best, so I got them both. So we'll fit it up, we'll have a look and see which fitting's probably gonna be best. And then we can crimp that fitting onto the end of the hose, reinstall it, and it should all work out pretty easy. So let's try to see how these fittings are roughly gonna sit.
So I test fitted both fittings, but ultimately decided that the 45-degree fitting was going to offer the better clearance to the engine mount. So with that decided, I can then go and cut my hose to length and then fit the fitting to the end, and it was ready to be reinstalled.
And so there's our braided line made up. Now we should be right to go and put this in the car. I just bloody dropped the ring spanner between the radiator and the aircon condenser, and this little magnet tool has saved me so many times it's not even funny. I can't even see in there. Oh. Ah. I'll tell you what. Oh, God. Lifesaver.
Accessing the fittings to do them up can be a little bit tricky, but I managed to get it sorted, and I also added a stainless steel clip to hold the line securely out of the way.
Now I was finally able to move the car into the shed because I had the oil feed line fitted up. Now I want to do a couple other things that I got hoses for. One is this coolant overflow hose. Now I actually replaced this on our trip away because it was weeping, but I probably didn't really get a long enough length as I should. I should have routed it longer, so I've gotten some more. And I think I'm going to do a loop and bring it through this corner to try and keep it neat. It's actually kind of in a crap spot, this, because the outlet for the overflow is on the opposite side to where the overflow is. So it means you have to do a 180-degree turn no matter which way you put it on. While I'm on the trend of replacing hoses, I'm going to do the turbo actuator line. It's slightly perished, so I've got a new little length to go in there, so we'll swap that over. So the next job on the list involves the cooling system. Essentially, my turbo coolant feed is routed from a bung in the back of the block, and it loops around the dump pipe, fairly close to it. It's been fine, but the engineers requested that I reroute it so that it, or P-clip it out of the way and also fire shield it. So it probably means that I'm gonna have to disconnect it and lose probably a bit of my coolant, which is kind of a pain in the bum, but it is what it is. So we'll go in there, we'll disconnect that line, we'll drain, we'll collect whatever coolant comes out because I didn't replace it too long ago. And then hopefully we can replace this hose and get it back together.
Oh, I caught it like a pro. Always a bonus when you can successfully catch 95% of the coolant, because I'm going to be reusing it.
So this is the old hose. I'm going to change the clips over. I've got a fresh length here, and I've also got some fire sleeve for it as well, which is going to keep it protected around that dump pipe. So this is just stuff I picked up from Pertec when I picked up all the tube. It's kind of soft, and you'll see if you look down the end, it's got like a fiber type layer which goes around the hose. So it's all pretty straightforward, but that's flame resistant, heat resistant, all that good stuff. And it should go on without too many dramas if it's the right size. All right, and there you go. So that's our bit of hose now coated or insulated by our fire sleeve. All right, and then the other part of this is going to be finding a suitable spot to P-clip it out the way. Watch it bottom out.
Oh. Tell you what, cars are the worst. Cars suck.
All right, so managed to get that coolant line on. Now I've secured it. So yeah, we'll hopefully try to get some coolant back in it, see how I go doing it on my own. Well, that's another one that we can tick off the list. Turbo coolant fell on exhaust. That's a tick. And with that, we've pretty much done all the hose stuff, I think. Now, another thing that I've been told to replace is it's the clutch and the brake pedal pads. So these pads down here, honestly, I don't even reckon they're that bad, but the corners are slightly worn on them. So he's asked for me to replace with new pads. So I managed to get some genuine pedal pad replacements from Patrol Apart, which makes this job nice and easy. Probably they're one of the easiest ones that we've got to do for engineering. So I'll swap these over, and yeah, that should keep you happy. All right. Well, that was simple as. Now we've got nice new pedal pads, so we can tick that one off the list. Now, there's one other thing that I've been hanging to check up on, and that's the steering wheel. It's been sitting here for actually just over a day now. I haven't had to put it on yet. And fingers crossed, the glue has, well, first of all, hopefully the glue got into the spot it needed to go. And second of all, hopefully it's adhered and dried and stuck it together. I'm kind of scared. Oh yeah. That's solid. I'm kind of scared to reef on it. Tiniest bit of slop there. There's really tight though. It's definitely worked. It's just, have I got the whole wheel? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna chuck this on the car because I reckon it's pretty, he's gonna look at that and that's not twisting on the grip. All right. So, steering wheel on. Don't want that one coming off while you're driving. This should just... So with all those jobs ticked off, everything else pretty much relies on me going on the underside of the car from the hoist So before we go and do that, I'm just gonna get the car running, make sure the cooling system's bled through, because next thing to do is take it down to Treadworks, as Nathan's gonna help me out with a wheel alignment because I need a current one. So yeah, so we'll get this thing started. I'll make sure she's running good, and then we can take it on down to Treadworks. All right. Well, it all seems to be free from leaks, which is good. So I think that means we're good to, yeah, she's good to drive.
Now, one of the requirements for engineering was a current wheel balance and wheel alignment, and there's only one place I know to get that done. Now, even when I built the Patrol, I never actually got a wheel alignment done, so it's been something I've meaning to do for a while, and it was the perfect chance to let Nathan at Treadworks have a good look over the car and fix any issues.
The figures is, like I said, roughly about 2 mil, but
Total toe,
they say, 1.9, but anywhere from sort of like
yes,
one to
not
3.
good.
No, so that's obviously why it's dragged the inside edges, because the wheels
okay.
are like that, and so you're sort of dragging the inside edges. So.
There you go. So that's why when you build your own car, you come to someone like Nathan, you get it aligned straight away, so you don't ruin a set of tyres like I have. You just do it right the first time.
Nathan discovered that the car had an underlying toe issue where it was towed out, and that caused the tyres to wear prematurely on the insides. So this was a great one to get fixed up so I can ensure my tyres are now wearing properly. Next involved rerouting the crankcase breather into the intake so that it wasn't venting to the atmosphere. It should be as simple as getting a bung fitted into some of the intake piping, so I drilled out the hole ready for the fitting, and then it was off to a mate's place who was happy to TIG weld in the fitting for me. I've come to see my mate Jasper at JatFab Metal Fabrication. He runs a small little business out of his shed at home and was happy to TIG up the parts for me as he has all the necessary equipment. Jasper's a pretty handy fella on the tools, and he's done some awesome projects of his own, which I was lucky enough to have a look at while we were there.
All right, so I've come to get the intake sorted so I can plumb the PVC, and I've come to see my mate Jasper, who he does a bit of fab work himself. He's got all the TIG welders and stuff, so super helpful and appreciative of that. But I'm having a look around his shed because he's got some pretty cool cars, like he's riding to all his patrols specifically, and everything else like that. And this one here is, it's like I don't see many cars like this, but it's cool to see someone that has it. Like, what is it exactly?
So it's a GQ. It's got a Barra out of a Falcon swapped into it, turboed, and makes a bit of power.
Yeah, well, that's the go. And he reckons that he might even take me for a drive, because I've never been in one. Like I was saying to him, I've never been in a Barra turbo full stop, like even in a Falcon. So I think it'd be pretty cool to feel someone in something that's usually as slow as a Patrol is. So yeah, well, we might take it for a run. That'll go in the video. No, I'm very curious to see how this goes. I've never been in anything like it. So, is it like the sort of like is it like laggy and then it just comes on boost and wants to take off, or is it like from down low?
It's probably not super, like it's talking down low because of the diff gearing.
Yeah.
But I suppose you could, like it's a turbo car, it is like a 2-stroke in a way kind of thing. Like it does hit, like you definitely know it's making boost.
Yeah. Far out.
Yeah, it moves along alright.
Yeah, shit, yeah, holy. That is sick. It's just crazy to see a car like this move like that. Well, for me anyway.
Yeah.
Just not expected at all. So there you go, that's the Barra. Super cool. And thanks to Jasper for tigging up that little bit for me. That's super handy, and we can get onto some more jobs. But yeah, JatFab, he does a few little things, so feel free to send him a message on Instagram. Maybe don't go asking for Barra conversions. I don't know how much time he's got in his hand, but he's pretty good, pretty handy on the fab work. Like, snorkels, intercool piping and stuff. So yeah, get on it. And meanwhile, I'm gonna go back to the shed and tick some more jobs off the list. All right, so Patrol is on the hoist because the next big job I need to tackle is the exhaust. Now, the engineer has said that there's a couple spots where it's touching the chassis, which, look, he's probably not wrong. The main one being where the upper control arm mounts the diff, the mount is hitting the exhaust, and it's actually put a bit of a dent in it. we'll see what we can do to fix it.
Now, I was a little bit annoyed that I had to change the exhaust again after just redoing it, but it is what it is. If it has to be fixed, it has to be fixed, so the only way to do it is to fix it. Now, seeing as you saw me build the exhaust at the start of the episode, I won't spend too much time showing you this, as it was pretty much the same process, just with some slightly different routing.
So that's the exhaust sorted, so we can move on to the next job. There's a few more little things to do from the underside of the car. All right, now the big thing I've probably got to do is swap over the springs and tires, but there's a couple other things I can do at the same time. So I got to swap the springs, but usually to do that, I got to disconnect the sway bars, which is actually convenient because I also have to replace the sway bar link bushes. So I'm going to take out the links. I've got some fresh ones to go in, and once I've taken the links out, it'll let the arse drop right down, the rear diff. And then I can pull the springs out, and same goes for the front too. Once those sway bar links are off, it'll drop right down. All right, so I got some new sway bar links to go, and the old ones are pretty worn out. Main benefits are new bushes and new Heim ends. So I'll whack these in the bench and grease these up before I whack them in the car. The main thing you wanted me to replace was the bushes, but I wanted to do the ends as well. And I also actually got a set of quick disconnect pins, so proper bolts with holes drilled for split pins, just for the front. The rear works well regardless of whether the sway bar's in or out, but the front does benefit off-road from having it disconnected, so having a set of quick disconnects will be really handy.
The sway bar links are a nice easy one to replace, and they ensure that the car doesn't have any squeaks and is nice and quiet and sturdy while driving on the road.
All right, well, I've been stuffing around for the last couple of hours, just anything I can see that I think I should change, I have. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's as ready as it's going to be. It feels like I'm preparing for a test in high school, and like it gets to the night before the test, and you're like, I don't have enough time to do much more. So it is what it is. So anyway, I just got to swap over the wheels and tires to the 33s. All right, we're out of the shed. All right, so the Patrol's out of the shed. Looks a little bit more presentable for its engineering. I'm gonna give it a bit of a gurney before I go, but I'm pretty confident I ticked everything off the list. So it was pretty daunting when it first began, but we managed to get through it. And I'm pretty confident I've got everything right. Only time will tell. But yeah, tomorrow's the big day. I'm gonna go down the house and sort out my paperwork, so that's all ready to go. And then, yeah, first thing in the morning, we'll be heading down to the engineers. All right, so we've got the Patrol back from its engineering final inspection, and I'm very relieved to say that it passed with flying colors. It's been a couple of days and I've had it back to Vic Road to get it transferred, which, let me tell you, that was a little bit of a stress situation itself, but we got it through. I'll talk more about that later. But for now, let me show you what we did this whole process for. This is what the whole process was for. This little blue mod plate just here, and then as well as our nice little laminated sheet that permanently lives in the car. Now, I do want to run you guys through what this sort of process costs in terms of time and money. But before I do that, I'll run through all the things that I've actually had engineered on this car, just so you can get an idea of, what we're working with. Now, the first thing is, which is the whole reason I did this, was to certify the body swap. Obviously, I changed the chassis from leaf to coil, and that was a whole process in itself. So it's now a 1994 GQ Ute. Because they register off the chassis, that sort of takes precedence over the cab and engine. So it's now registered as a 1994 model, even though it's a 96 cab and motor. And that's been done with a surrogate VIN number, which I'll show you. I've got a little badge now up on the body on the firewall, as well as having the numbers re-stamped on the chassis. Now, that was all I was originally intending to get done, but as engineering goes, I quickly found out that they have to do everything on the car, so there's a whole bunch of other stuff here that it is now mod plated for as well. So the tray has been engineered, and the way that I have welded it to the chassis, so you would have saw there I had to change the plates over to suit. That's when I did a little oopsie on my leg, but that is now all sorted. The chassis has also been reinforced with chassis bracing, which when I built the car you would have seen I did, and as well as putting the tray mounts on, that was welded, so all the welding on the chassis is now certified. Now again, because I'm using a different chassis, the way they've worded this is that the OEM engine from the chassis, which was a 4.2 petrol, has been replaced with the TD42 engine. And they've also at the same time mod plated for the turbocharger that I added, which is the factory GU setup, as well as the now 11mm injector pump. Now they've also engineered for the twin tanks. As you saw, Jeff Fab helped me whip up a new aluminium tank for the front, and they had to certify that I'd put that in place. They've also mod plated for the GU diffs, so because they come from a different variant, they've got a mod plated, and the things that go with that are the fact that it's got GU brakes, so it's effectively got an upgraded braking system, so that's something that's listed on here too. Sort of going along with that, they've listed a whole bunch of suspension components, so things like pan hard rods, coil tower bracing, steering linkages, all that sort of stuff. That all gets listed on here. I didn't think it had to be, but apparently as part of their look over, they just listed on here. I assume it makes it easier, so if you do get pulled up, you can say, look, it's been certified for all these individual components. And on that note with suspension, the other thing with this whole swap, going from leaf to coil, it's actually had a GVM D rate. So the leaf spring GQ, I believe, was 3190. GVM, and now it's 3040. So I've lost 150 kilos of GVM, and that's a GU GVM as well. The engineer said because I got GU diffs, he'll give me the biggest GVM he can with them. So it's higher than a GQ coil, but it's not as high as the Leafy. So I have actually lost some GVM rating there, which is a bit unfortunate. And they've also made a note as well of the bar work being ADR compliant. That's another good thing about all the Raslar stuff. It is all crash tested, so that's no dramas getting engineered. And the last little thing that got done as well, which is always a hot topic, is headlights, because I've got LED headlights fitted into the Patrol. It came out with halogen globes. Yeah, these are certified because they're steady lights. They meet the Australian design rules. I have to provide some paperwork, but yeah, they're all on the list as well. So hopefully won't be able to get done for them either. So as the car sits here, it is completely legal. Keeping in mind it is on 2-inch and 33s, but that's it, just like that, which is a huge stress off my head. It's great to know. But now with that done, let's get into the cost of this whole operation. Now, the first thing to note about engineering is it's not going to be cheap. I can guarantee you that. And it is going to vary a lot depending on what sort of car you have and what the extent of your modifications are and what you're trying to get engineered. Now, in my case, when I first went into engineering, like I hadn't done anything to do with engineering ever before, had no idea what the process was like. And from what I was sort of told originally, and from what I thought, I figured I was only going to be getting the engineering done for the cab swap, or the chassis swap, sorry. And that was not going to be no money, but I thought it was going to be cheaper than what it ended up costing. Now, after talking with the engineers, it quickly became apparent that it was going to cost more because I had more mods done to my car, which they can't just, ignore. They have to engineer everything that's been done to the car. And, the cost is just what the cost is. And you'll find very quickly that when you go through the registered list of VAS signatories, there's sort of there's fewer around to begin with. And then there's even fewer that do particular type of jobs. For example, I had to find one that would do a chassis swap or body swap, and not all engineers do chassis swaps. Some just do GVM upgrades. And all sorts of other stuff. So yeah, you're sort of limited in where you can actually go to get it done. So what's the cost of this process? Well, we're not going to include labor because I did all the work myself. The engineering mob, other than putting the plates on, they didn't do any of the work. That was all me. So the first cost was the initial inspection, and that set me back about 800 bucks. The car was there for about half a day. And then I didn't have any costs up until getting, all the mod plating actually done. Now, each different mod has its own vehicle modification code, and those codes come with an associated cost. Now, for example, to get the turbocharger engineered as well as the boost compensated pump, that is an LA3 code, and it cost me $750. The fuel tank alteration was 250 bucks. The axles are about 300 bucks a piece. The list goes on, and as you can imagine, it adds up pretty quick. Outside of modifications, you've got other things like noise and smog testing, as well as our surrogate VIN application, which that comes at a hefty cost of about 1,000 bucks. And yeah, it adds up very quickly. So all in all, engineering the car costed me about $4.5 grand. But wait, there's a little bit more. So then I had to go to Vic Roads to get it transferred, which that turned out to be a little bit of sort of confusion in itself. The person at Vic Roads wasn't quite familiar with this kind of swap, and I ended up having to actually re-register the car with the new surrogate VIN number, as I simply couldn't change the details. So that involved a re-registering fee, as well as re-registering because I've got black slimline plates. So that's another cost again. And I'm glad to say now it's all done, but I just want to make it aware to anyone that wants to undertake a process like this, it is going to cost you. So that's the engineering process in a nutshell. I'm just glad to be done with it. This took over a year, so I'm sick of these papers. But pretty much, That's the engineering process, and the one thing to remember about all this is that this is state specific, and this is something that's a huge ongoing problem for a lot of people. I could drive this interstate and all of a sudden the authorities up there don't agree with my mod plates, or if it got sold interstate, my mod plates don't apply. So anyway, it's an interesting thing to know. I'm glad I went through the process. That's my experience with engineering. I hope you learned something. I hope it gave you a bit of an idea of what to expect if you go for engineering yourself on your own vehicle. But until then, make sure you leave a like and a comment down below on what you thought. Make sure you get subscribed, and we'll catch you in the next episode.